Welcome to the Mindful Professional, where we explore the intersection between purpose, growth, and meaningful human connection. Today, I'm joined by realtor Nick Lutkins. Real estate is often viewed as buying, selling homes, but behind every transaction, there's a human story. There's dreams, transition, uncertainty, and new beginnings. Today, we'll explore not only Nick's professional journey, but also the mindset, values, and relationship that have shaped his path. All right. So I am ready to start with my questions. I'm so glad that you've taken some time. And from our conversations in the past, we've talked about how you kind of went from being in commercial work to real estate, and now you're taking it a step further and doing things and creating resources, especially for seniors. But I'm very curious again for my audience to kind of get on the same page is tell me a little bit about yourself and then how you found your way into real estate.
That's a great, great, big, giant question. Um, so again, I'm Nick Lutkins, and my wife and I have a small boutique residential real estate team here in Northern Virginia. So my wife actually started prior to me in real estate. I was in sort of the advertising marketing agency world for many years. But she got into real estate in 2010. And this was during the short sale boom, foreclosure, short sales, et cetera. And she's a very strong advocate, kind of a client advocate. And so she kind of cut her teeth in real estate doing a lot of short sales. And you see a lot of people that are really hurting, and it's very emotional, and you very easily get wrapped up in their problems, et cetera. Over time, she started to encourage me to join her. As I was winding down my other businesses. And in 2014, I actually jumped in full time with her. And it was interesting because the short sale world was sort of ending at that point as the economy was recovering. And we got into just more traditional real estate sales, listings and buyers, et cetera. But over time, what we found was that as we were getting a little bit older, that we were dealing with a lot of people who were starting to retire, start thinking of what that next chapter looks like in their lives. And over the last few years, we actually right-sized, some people call it downsized, right-sized when we became empty nesters about 5 years ago. All the kids had left, and we were sitting in a big home and realized that, we were there for 28 years and raised our kids there, but realized that it just no longer fit our personal lifestyle needs. So this was during COVID, and we started thinking about, okay, what would it look like if we did something different? So emotionally, we were ready.
Mhm.
However, as we were mentioning this to our children, they started pushing back a little bit because emotionally they grew up in this house. The other thing is, we're professional realtors, so we knew that, especially during COVID, all you had to do is put a sign out in front of the house, and you get gazillions of offers. Selling the house wasn't the issue. It was really more the preparing emotionally and physically for going through almost 30 years of kids' stuff in the basement and preparing the house for sale. And it could get kind of overwhelming. So, even though we helped a lot of people do the same thing, now we had to face it ourselves. So it was a
Yeah.
humbling experience, and it gave us a much better appreciation of the emotional side and the logistical side of what it takes to downsize or right size and move on to that next chapter. The last couple of years, this has been really growing on us, and we are dealing more and more with people who they talk about, well, kids have all left, or I'm thinking of retiring and not staying in the area, or I've got grandkids in the area. I don't want to move necessarily. Maybe I want to age in place. So we have a lot of these conversations that aren't necessarily always turning into a sale. We found ourselves being almost more consultants because we have a good business. We don't need to force people to buy or sell, but our heart is in helping people think through, and sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years
Yeah.
to process what this next chapter looks like. And we always jokingly say, so if we meet with, let's say, a couple, and they've been married, 10, 15, 30 years, whatever or more. And we always say, it's, of course, husbands and wives always agree on everything. Uh, not. Let's say he might say, well, I was thinking of retiring down at the beach. And she might say, well, I prefer the mountains. And so we find that a lot of people they get a little paralyzed in
Yeah.
moving forward with a decision, and many
Hmm.
times just don't make a decision. And sometimes as they get older, their health deteriorates. Maybe, they can't do stairs well anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And then the worst case scenario is when they realize that they can no longer make the decisions themselves, and then, their
Yeah.
adult children have to make decisions for them. So that's where we love interacting with them early and just having conversations without feeling pressured to buy or sell,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
helping them transition into that next chapter, whatever that may be.
Yeah, wow, that's a long way coming from marketing background to not just diving into real estate, but finding a niche on what you really enjoy and like to do. So you mentioned your wife had talked to you a few times about kind of joining her in the real estate business. Was there a defining moment or an experience that you finally was like, yeah, this is it, this is how what I want to do moving forward?
It was about a 2-year process.
Okay.
Um, but I think as I was thinking about it, because it's real estate's very, very different than what I had previously done. But essentially, I was a consultant, not a hard salesperson. And as many people know in real estate, everybody knows at least 10 real estate agents in the Northern Virginia area. Real estate agents can be considered pushy salespeople, just like, car dealers and stuff. So I had to really think about, am I qualified? Is this something? And my wife is not a pushy salesperson at all. But I
Yeah.
think once I sort of grappled with the fact that no, we're not that kind of real estate agent. So over time, we've built up a good reputation of being more consultative. And, the first couple of years are really tough, just building your database, your sphere. But over time, most of our business is referral, repeat. We don't like to be, hammering the phones, calling 200 people a day. That's just not our style.
Yeah.
I think we're people. Well, to answer your question, I think once I sort of came to the realization that I don't need to be like that to be successful in this business, it's just still being a consultant, but in a different format, different
Yeah.
industry. So my wife and I really just worked that through. She's very much more, um, I say, detail oriented in terms of contracts and negotiation, where my background is more the business development, developing relationships. And I think once we sort of realized that we're a good complement to each other,
Yeah.
we took the dive into it, and it's worked out very well. We kind of know each where our own lane is, but we work very well together, which I say always be careful with working with your spouse.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I've heard.
yeah,
I've had a few friends where they work with their spouse within the audiology practice, and I've heard both ways that, like you, they complement each other, or heard it the other way where like, let's just keep it outside of the 8 to 9 to 5. So it's nice. So you had mentioned, that people often think that realtors are like pushy salespeople. Is that one of the most misunderstood thing about realtors? Is there anything else that people misunderstand about realtors?
that's a great question. I can only speak from my experience.
Sure.
I know sort of a whole spectrum of realtors out there. There are some who are getting into the business, or it's very part-time. Maybe their spouse makes a lot of money, and they may do 1 or 2 deals a year. So they're not, I would say, I always say it's just like sort of the analogy of the surgeon is, if you have a surgeon that does 1 or 2 surgeries a year, versus somebody that does 300 a year, there's a lot of complexities in the contract. There's
Yeah.
the contract changes twice a year. So you really have to be on top of things because you're representing your client, on a very, very large ticket item typically. So you really want to make sure that you know what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
we're my wife and I definitely, are pour ourselves into continuing education and keeping on top of everything. But there are realtors out there who do it very part-time. They don't really know what they're doing, and then they can sometimes get very hungry, so they get very pushy and try to force people into making decisions. And we got to a point where we said we built our practice up enough where we didn't rely on that next deal to pay our mortgage.
Sure.
So we could relax. We could say, listen, this is not the right house for you. And if it takes another 6 months, that's fine. Let's find you the right home, or this isn't a good time to sell right now. Maybe you should wait several months. So it's about building trust. So there again, and then there are people out there who are realtors with very, very big teams. Nothing wrong with very big teams, but there's a lot of pressure in these teams to make your numbers. So
Yeah.
they're slamming the phones, calling up anybody and being annoying. And that's where sometimes reputation, these realtors are kind of told, here's the script, call, and try
Yeah.
to manipulate somebody into a meeting. And people feel very, bleh, you know. So, uh, so I think that my wife and I, and we have a very small team, a couple of other people on our team, but we're a boutique, and we're really our goal, our practice is about consultation,
Sure.
not quantity. We do well, but we're not trying to take over the world. We're trying to be people that over time we build a strong relationship, and then once we start to work with them and we prove ourselves and show value, they then start referring us to their friends and family because they trust us. And so that's sort of our model. There's no
Yeah.
right or
Yeah.
wrong, but I think we feel very comfortable in our own skin and how we
Sure.
approach
Sure.
working with people.
Yeah. You mentioned it sometimes takes you 2 to 4 years to kind of, start with building relationship to the sale of the house. And obviously through that process, and in fact, just selling a home could be highly emotional. How do you support your clients through these emotions?
Well, we're not licensed psychologists, but
Of course.
there is a lot of hand-holding that can be had,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, selling a home, for instance, even buying a home, but selling a home, especially after being in that home for many years, even in the best of circumstances, is an emotional transaction.
Yeah.
Can we sell a home in a weekend these days? Sure. But people aren't always ready. So you have to kind of gauge where they are in their journey, so that they feel comfortable and they're emotionally ready to
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
go. In some situations, we work with people that are in very stressful situations, such as a divorce, contentious divorce, or loss of a spouse. They've been in their house for 40 years. They just lost their wife or husband, and they're just overwhelmed. They're a
Yeah.
little bit older. They don't process as quickly. I think as
Yeah.
we all get a little older, and you've got to be very cognizant of where they are and not just push them on your own agenda. You really have to
Sure.
find
Sure.
out. Sometimes it's working with their children, adult children, and having to coordinate the dynamics of the kids, the siblings, legal issues, sometimes with the attorneys, probate attorney, et cetera, et cetera. So it can get very complicated. But I think that's where that's our space. We love helping people. We're good problem solvers.
Yeah.
I always say, we're realtors, but we're really problem solvers and helping people transition into that
Yeah,
next
yeah. And
chapter of their
it's
lives.
yeah. And it sounds like you're doing more than problem solving. You're holding space and you're also coordinating not with just the person selling their house, possibly with their family members also to help through the transition. And that takes a lot of like patience and compassion to be able to hold space for somebody, especially if they're going through a difficult situation, like you mentioned, and focus on their agenda instead of our agenda to just sell and move on. That's very powerful to be able to do that and show build trust with your clients. That's very nice.
Yeah.
So you've seen clients with coming from different situations trying to sell or buy,
Mhm.
and what have your clients taught you in general about people, relationships, and life through your experience in helping all these different people buying and selling their houses?
If I understand your question, sorry, what have they taught us through all of these
Yeah.
transactions? That's a great question. Um, I I would say that at the end of the day, real estate, what we do, the transaction part of it is contractual, and there's sort of there's steps along the way to actually make the transaction work. But truly, what we do is we help people transition from one part of their lives to another. And everything is relational, there's empathy involved. You've got to sit and really listen, not just come in with your own agenda. And I think back to what you were saying about that reputation of some real estate agents is there are a lot of real estate agencies that push sales training, as it were. And that is
Sure.
all about, a lot of times it's not, they don't teach you how much to listen. It's like, okay, this is what you need to say. This is how you say it. This is the tone you use it. And the goal is to get an appointment. Obviously, we all have to make a living. But I think over time, what we've discovered is that if you just sit down and you shut up, you start asking them open-ended questions to
Yeah.
really understand where they're coming from. Because a lot of times on the surface, what we've learned is that that initial meeting,
Hmm.
they're skeptical. They have in mind that you're going to come in and you're going to try to manipulate them into signing a listing agreement or a buyer agreement. So we have learned to more and more disarm or the situation in the beginning and just say, listen,
Sure.
I'm not going to make you sign anything today. I really want to understand where you are right now. And many times they'll give you a sort of a surface answer. And
Yeah.
goal will be to try to just build their trust and so that they go deeper. What are their real motivations? What are their real concerns? Because the more we really understand where they are and what's going on in their heads, the more we can help with the right solution versus just
Sure.
okay, let's just get it signed, let's put a sign up and let's sell it. So, they don't feel railroaded. At the end of the day, I mean, we jokingly say that, when you work with the Lutkins group and our team, you're more than the transaction, you're family. And that's kind of that's how we operate because we want to work with people who essentially become almost an extended family down the road where they can come to our events, we can get to know them to the level where if we see something that can help them, even on the financial or legal or this and that, that we could say to them, listen, you're going through this right now. Maybe do you have a good financial planner? Do you have a good lawyer? And we can act as almost a concierge to them down the road.
Yeah.
When you're just trying to buy or sell and you bye, you don't get to that level where you can really get to know them and them get to know you and trust you. So we just learned over time that that's really the way to go is shut up, listen, dig a little deeper,
Yeah.
ask more questions, and get to that point where they feel so comfortable that they will really tell you what's going on so that you can really help them in the right way.
Yeah. 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 So you mentioned giving people resources and being a concierge service for them. Before earlier during our call, you had mentioned you're coming up with something, you're launching something that would be a resource to senior community. Tell me more about it.
This isn't something that we decided yesterday. It's been sort of brewing for the last couple of years. But
Yeah.
as we have started to work more and more with, let's say, retiring seniors, active adults that are starting, maybe their kids are all leaving now, or, death of a spouse, this kind of stuff, it occurred to us that most real estate agents will just say, I can help anyone. I can help a new buyer, first time buyer. I can help anybody. I'm a real estate agent. I've got a license, hire
Yeah.
me, which, yeah, yes, we can help anybody within, let's just say Northern Virginia. We're just licensed in Virginia. But the last couple of years, we started to really realize that there seemed to be a lack of a comprehensive approach to helping active adult, 55 plus active adults move into that next chapter of their lives, whatever that may be. And I think that's near and dear to our heart is because we ourselves did this 5 years ago, we have that certain empathy and we could sit down with somebody and they realize that it's not just some young whippersnapper that says, I can sell your house. It's, hey, you understand where I am. It may not be exact, but you have that experience, you listen, et cetera. So there are some real estate practices around the country that have what they call their silver division, if you call it,
Mhm.
working with seniors. And we wanted to create something that was not just about buying and selling real estate. We realized that as people, let's say they retire, we see this all the time. Somebody retires after 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden they're sitting at home and they're it's a bit of a crisis because they're no longer talking to their colleagues at work. They're now stuck at home with their spouse. Their spouse is going, what are you doing here? Get out of the house. But they start to feel a little more isolated because they're not dealing with the same group of people that they
Yeah.
were used to dealing with. So as they're starting to look at that next chapter, it could be a health issue. It could be, the kids are out of the house. They don't want all the maintenance of a big house, et cetera. They they start to internalize it where they think they're the only ones that have this issue. Which sometimes you see a little bit of this post-retirement depression. And I don't mean in a critical way, but it's just something that you could see, what am I going to do? So I think what prompted us to create this new entity of sorts, we're calling it Next Chapter Living, and we're developing a website specifically for this, where it's being in Northern Virginia, there are a lot of people that are interested in the 55 plus communities, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
So in our new website, we do have a very comprehensive collection of all of the 55 plus communities, active communities within Loudoun County, and then Prince William County is coming, and there are a lot of them. So we're going to have a lot of information about each of these communities for reference. But the purpose, the bigger goal of our website over time as we build this is it's going to be more of a community, building a community where people that are in this stage of life can go in and explore and get information. So there are going to be lots of blogs, videos, where they can start to explore, what does that next chapter look like? It could be aging in place,
Yeah.
so we're not going to help them buy or sell a home. That's fine. It could be, we're really interested. We have friends that moved into a 55 community and they love it, but we're kind of skeptical. So we're providing resources where they can explore without feeling pressure to do anything. It could be, hey, we're looking to get out of this crazy area and move to warmer climates. Um, so over time, we're going to start building resources where they can start exploring outside of the area. That could be an hour away. It could be, down to Florida. Um, and that's very legitimate too. And people sometimes have said, when I'm retiring, I'm going to Florida, and that's fine. So we can also act as almost a concierge travel agent where we can help them find a great agent in another state, another area, that we vet and we make sure that there's a good match. So it's sort of like a matchmaker approach. We love doing that, but we've got to know them first to really understand what their personality is like. So we match them up with somebody
The
that
correct resource. Yeah.
and there's no obligation to use them. It's just more of it's a start. One of the biggest mistakes we see with people that leave the area and go to, let's say, Wilmington, North Carolina, is they show up, they go to some storefront real estate agent, and they get some, you know, person that just got their license and doesn't know anything. That's a big mistake. So, we can vet and find very experienced people that understand where they are. And even people that many times out of state. We see a lot of people from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, very high tax states that are now on fixed incomes. They may coming down this way, or they have family here. They want to be closer to their kids or their grandkids. So the purpose of this site is really going to be sort of multifold, but it's a place where you can go in and explore and get answers to questions. And so that's really our goal, is to create this community. And there really isn't anything out there right now that does this. So we're really excited about this because
Yeah.
this is only the start. But as we develop more content and more of these resources for people, we want to see a vibrant community, and maybe even set up forums where people can talk to each other about a multitude of subjects, from financial, estate planning, all these kind of things. And um, to be able to provide resources for people who have questions about these things, we can provide links and stuff to these professionals to answer their
Yeah.
specific questions.
Very interesting. Yeah. So it seems like I'm just so curious on how do you find your balance in doing all of these things? You're doing consulting, building relationships, now you're expanding, finding resources, putting it all together. How do you stay balanced, stay present, stay connected through all of these different things that you're doing?
Not easy. I always say, when you're doing something that you have a passion for and you
Yeah.
feel like this is a mission. My wife and I are, I mean, we have our differences in terms of how to do it, but they always say, iron sharpens iron, where my wife and I sometimes will spar back and forth with how to do something, but the solution usually is always better. But we are both right now totally in alignment with that. This is more than just selling and buying homes. This is
Yeah.
really about developing long-term relationships and helping people transition in this period of their lives. We've been there. We understand that, again, it's more than a transaction. And we love referring people to other professionals who, I mean, such as yourself, when you and I spoke, that made my day. I absolutely could see that I deal with a lot of people that could probably use your help. I'm a connector by nature. This is my gift.
Yeah.
And I love helping people. By listening to them, you understand that sometimes it has nothing to do with real estate. It has other problems they're trying to solve. So the more I know, people like you, people like estate planning attorneys or financial professionals or anything, movers,
Yeah.
I can really be the concierge that you can turn to. And well, I say we, but that you can turn to, and we will help you much more than just real estate. And I don't know, that energizes us. And so how do we deal with all of that is, one day at a time. We you got to keep the passion, you got to keep the vision. And we
Yeah.
feel very strongly that we have something here that we feel will grow and help people in our general age group.
Nice, nice. Do you have a daily practice that helps you stay grounded?
Yes. Personally, I usually have a time of sort of prayer, listening to, what I call daily devotionals, reading some scripture, just trying to plug in to
Yeah,
something higher than me,
yeah,
that realizing that I am just, in a sense, a servant. My wife and I both feel like we have always come with a servant's heart. Our goal is to help people, because at the end of the day, directly or indirectly, it comes back to us. So it's not about the next dollar. It's really about feeling very strongly to help people. And
sure.
we try to keep that in mind every single day. The other thing that absolutely every day before the day gets very far, I always think about, say, 5 things that I'm grateful for, because it's easy to wake up and just get caught up in the craziness of this business and this area. But I find that if I sit down and write down 5 things that I'm grateful for, and it could be something very simple, like I'm grateful for the meal my wife made last night. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what it is, but if you feel grateful, the
Yeah.
day becomes one more of gratitude and perspective to keep you grounded.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I do something similar too. I kind of start the day with either meditating, reading, reflecting, journaling, and that just sets the mood for the day. And you spend the rest of the day with the intention to serve, especially when you have gratitude in that mix. It really kind of sets that mood. And we're in the service industry, and
Yeah.
that helps quite a bit when we're at work doing our thing. So I'm very nice, very glad I asked that question.
Yeah, no,
So
that
just
was a great question. And I think that's where when we first spoke, I felt very aligned with
yeah,
the way you operate and the way you think. So
thank you, thank you. I have a couple more, and so tell me what core values guide you the way you do business.
I think being authentic in a very non-authentic world business, as I mentioned before, and well, I think I want to go back to authentic for a second, but authentic, be honest. There are a lot of things that go wrong in this business that are out of our control. And sometimes we've been known to mess up too. But if you basically are honest with your clients, they're much more forgiving if something goes wrong instead of trying to cover up things. I think the authenticity, being honest, educating ourselves, keeping educated, because if we aren't up to everything, we're not giving good advice to people. So
Yeah,
the professional education, self-education is very important value that we have. And I would say, the core value of faith. This world can beat you down. And I think just realizing that there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, there's going to be good months, there's going to be bad months, is that we've been in the business long enough now that we see there's cycles, and not to just panic, but to look at things from a broader perspective, keep focused. So that's a couple of them. But I wanted to just say something about authenticity is, we've been in the business now 16 years. We've gone through tons of sales training. We've gone through tons of stuff. And I jokingly say everybody knows at least 10 real estate agents in the area. And
yeah,
if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you see a million videos and posts from real estate agents. And a lot of it is, what do they say about comparison is poison of your heart or something like that, where with social media, you're looking at these what seem to be very successful real estate agents. They're strutting around, they're driving their Lamborghinis, they're flipping their beautiful blonde hair, whatever. I got my gray hair, but I realize that as we are moving forward in real estate, comparison is still there. It's always gnawing at you. It's like, oh, I'm not as good as them, and this and that. And we finally sort of realized that we're not totally immune to that. However, as I'm getting older, as my wife is getting a little bit older, she's younger than me, but we're at that stage where we're starting to go, you know what? If we're not authentic to ourselves, we're not authentic to somebody else. So if we put on this air on video and this and that, that isn't really who we are when we show up in front of them, there's a disconnect. And people can
yeah,
see that there's the lack of integrity. So I'd say integrity is another core value, is giving ourselves permission to just be who we are. And the right people will be attracted to us. The wrong people will stay away from us, and that's okay. So that's that's something that is
excellent.
very important to us.
Yeah, yeah. So what legacy do you hope to leave through the work that you do?
I hope that with everything that we're doing, whether it's geared towards 55 plus community or not, that other real estate agents in our industry would look at us and say, you know what? They're not fake. They're real and they're successful. So I don't have to be fake to be successful. I can be who I am. And each person is different. So, I would love to leave that with people to say, be who you really are, as long as you have a true servant's heart. You're there to help people, not just make sales. And that's kind of where that part from a professional standpoint to our children. We have three kids, adults now, but we want to leave that legacy that we work really hard. We are passionate about what we do. We go overboard to help people, sometimes even if it's not in our best interest financially, and that they, whatever they're doing, they have that same perspective of being, having a servant's heart and helping people, even though they don't make instant money from it. Because I think in the long run, at the end of your days, you're going to have a more satisfaction than just saying, hey, I made a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. And people often remember how you made them feel than what you left for them in terms of money wise. So I feel like with the connections that you're making, not just with your children, but with every client of yours, I think that, looking back, they're going to remember how you made them feel as you openly listen and with curiosity to say, what do they really need? You put their needs first. So that stays for a long time. People remember these things for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So I've come to my last question. If you could leave our listeners with one message about living, working, and connecting with others more intentionally, what would it be?
Hmm, that's a great question. You know, I don't know if this is going to be an exact to your question, but I would say in light of what is happening in the world, say, and I don't mean just politically or geopolitically. I mean, look at what technology has done. And I've got some perspective because, I when I graduated from college, there wasn't even a fax machine yet. So, this is the Stone Ages. I've seen a tremendous growth in that. Then I've
Yeah,
seen the technology grow through my children with cell phones and smartphones and everything else. Is we increasingly are being more and more isolated, um, especially for the younger generation, but it's starting to go into I'm not immune to it myself. You're sitting there walking around with your cell phone, looking at your cell phone, is we're losing that sense of being able to relate to people one to one. And it's something where it's a cautionary tale of people like to work with people that they know, like, and trust. And doing it all via cell phone or text, you're growing further and further apart. You can't get deeper. I would say, a word of advice to anyone is spend more time with people, coffee,
yeah,
lunch, sit down with them and, put the phone away and actually have deeper conversations because I think people are screaming in a sense in their heads to be heard.
yeah,
And the life happens. I mean, this area in particular, like any major city or metropolitan area, it's fast, it's furious. People, it's drive-by stuff. And I think that as we're working with, I say, oh, I hate to use the word senior, but aging baby boomers, they come from a generation like us that there was a time when you didn't have cell phones, that you had a telephone, and you can't put that all back in the bag, but I would say now is the time to really think about spending more time face to face with people, even if it's awkward at first. It's an exercise, it's a muscle that you can grow back in a sense. And I
yeah,
think that whatever business you're in, um, the more you sit down with somebody and really talk, the more you will build that trust because there are a lot of things AI can do now. There are a lot of things automation can do, but I don't think that there's always going to be that opportunity where want that
the human
face to
touch.
face empathy, um, and that trusted person they can turn to. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It is definitely, as technologies improve, we've started doing this and we forgot how to connect like this. And so it's really important, like you said, is to do like connection outside of the technology, whether it's coffee, lunch, just conversations, to have the phone aside. And then you can really truly hear the person, connect with the person, relate to the person, and build relationships. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate, and this has been a wonderful conversation. We bought and sold our home in the past, and from hearing from you and just general about like realtors, the big box realtors, I'm like, yeah, I can relate to some of those
Yeah.
experiences and how just connecting, building relationship, building trust would have changed that transaction. So I really, really appreciate this conversation, especially for our listeners, which are our patients. Our videos go on our newsletter, and majority of our patients are older adults, and this would be a really informative video for them. I'm so grateful to be talking to you today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This has been great and actually very therapeutic for me too. Just being able to express that. But yeah, we're very passionate about this, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you and your patients.